Hello, everyone. All right, thank you all for joining us. My name is Mackenzie Williams, and I am the Art and Architecture Librarian here at the Cooper Union. It is my great pleasure to welcome you this evening to our first in our Spring 2023 series of the Public Art Fund Talks at Cooper Union. We are thrilled, as always, to be working with the Public Art Fund. They are an organization with whom we share a deep commitment to the fundamental power and democratization of art and connecting cultural and creative production to a wide audience. We've had the honor of partnering with them over the last 4 years to host conversations like this in conjunction with significant New York City exhibitions and public artwork. Tonight, we are excited to be expanding our reach to the other side of the Hudson with 2 site-specific commissions that celebrate the heroes, heritage, and landscapes of New Jersey. We have a fascinating discussion about these new works ahead of us. So let me once again thank the Public Art Fund team for making this series possible and their ongoing support of important creative and civic dialogue. It is now my pleasure to welcome the Public Art Fund's Artistic and Executive Director, Nicholas Baume, who will be introducing tonight's 2 featured artists. Nicholas Baume has curated dozens of exhibitions with a wide range of international artists at different stages of their careers. He has been with the Public Arts Fund since 2009 and previously serving as a curator at institutions like the Cladmore Art Projects, the Museum of Contemporary Art in Sydney, the Wadsworth Atheneum, and more recently, Boston's Institute of Contemporary Art. So please join me in welcoming Nicholas Baume.
Thank you so much, Mackenzie. Is the audio good? I'm hearing, oh yeah, there we go. Okay, all systems go. Thank you, Mackenzie, for that lovely, warm welcome. We are always thrilled to be here at Cooper Union and delighted that even on the day that saw our first snow this winter, these brave New Yorkers have ventured out. So fantastic, and even Philadelphians, have joined us as well. But this series is one of the cornerstones of our programming, the opportunity to connect the most interesting contemporary artists and the dialogue around contemporary art and public art with a broad public audience and students here at Cooper Union is a really special partnership. So thanks very much to the Cooper Union. I want to begin also by acknowledging the Lenape. In fact, I feel it's even more, it's especially appropriate given that in Layqa's work, as we'll see, there are a lot of interesting references to Indigenous cultures. So I do want to acknowledge the Lenape, the original people of the land that we're now based on in New York, acknowledging the genocide and forced removal of the Lenape nations from this land, Lenape Hoking, and honor as well the many First Nations people who continue to live and work in this region today. I want to also give a shout out to some of the sponsors who support this work here, our talk series, Con Edison, the New York State Council of the Arts, the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs, and of course the wonderful Public Art Fund Board. So let me maybe just begin with a very brief couple of words of introduction about the project. Maybe we can even pull up the first slide. So Public Art Fund was invited. Oh, I'm going to pull up the first slide. You know, this is a tough job, okay? There it is. Yeah, so the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, sometimes New Yorkers forget the and New Jersey part. But that is a lot of, obviously, it really is a sort of unique joint agency, and Newark Airport is a part of that, that portfolio. And so the opportunity to work on 2 major permanent commissions for the new terminal, Terminal A at Newark. And so we convened a committee that was made up of Port Authority leadership, New Jersey-based arts professionals and stakeholders to advise on the selection. And we ended up with an extraordinary group of artists, and the Port Authority leadership ultimately chose Layqa Nuna Yawar and Karyn Olivier for these extraordinary commissions. And for Public Art Fund, I have to say, this has really been a remarkable project because it's extended our reach beyond New York into New Jersey for the first time. And that's enabled us to serve both a global audience of travelers and a local audience of unparalleled diversity, the opportunity to tell their stories and capture the spirit of a place as only great works of art can do. So tonight we have the company of these 2 brilliant artists, and to begin, Karyn and Layqa will each introduce their own works, followed by a discussion, and we'll have time for audience questions as well. So Karyn, born in Trinidad and Tobago and now based in Philadelphia, she considers history, place, migration, and visibility and invisibility through sculptures in a range of materials, including found objects, industrial materials, and photography. In these sculptures, Olivier collapses multiple histories, memories, locations, and times, creating singular expressions of larger processes of movement and change. Now the work, we get a glimpse in this slide of actually the 2 works, since you can see both of them simultaneously. Karyn's work cascading sort of through a multi-storied open space between the floors, and Layqa's work behind that in this photo. And Karyn's work is actually 2 50-foot suspended sculptures titled Approach. And it's an installation that celebrates flight by capturing different views of Newark and Elizabeth, New Jersey, in photographs of local architecture, infrastructure, and topography shot from sunrise to nightfall. It's a dynamic study of landscape and time, 2 elements that define a unique experience of place. Layqa is a Latinx artist, large-scale muralist, educator, and activist, born in Ecuador and now based in Newark. He creates art informed by his immigrant and multicultural identity, confronting racism, injustice, and xenophobia through imagery that uplifts those targeted by those prejudices. He uses the mural as a platform to explore and celebrate these historically marginalized identities. And you see part of the work. It is so big. Actually, both of these works are impossible to photograph in one image, which makes it, a challenge to present the work, but they will bring it to life. Layqa's mural is 350 feet wide. It celebrates the abundant diversity of Newark and New Jersey, from local flora and fauna to influential identities past and present. The work's looped narrative can be read from left to right or right to left, and it includes airport workers, poets, LGBTQ+ heroes. Layqa's mural rethinks who should be celebrated publicly and proposes that all individuals are equally remarkable in their humanity. So with that sort of framing and context. Now I think I'll hand it over to the artist, and Karyn, would love it if you would perhaps begin and share more about your work.
Sure. I have to hold this, so I won't be able to do my flailing of my arms the way I usually do. I was thinking about how when I submitted my proposal, the title I came up with was Airborne, which everyone loved, but then they thought in light of COVID, maybe that wasn't the best. But the switch to approach actually works better. It's actually a term that pilots use. And I like the idea that it's a site that's so active that it's also like you actually literally approach the work. So I'm going to show some images. So just to start off with kind of describing what you're seeing, there are two helix-like shaped sculptures that are 52 feet tall. They're double-sided images. So I was playing around with the idea of I knew photography had to be the entry point, and I kept thinking, I mean, I went through many rabbit holes of trying to figure out what to do. I mean, the amount of Amira Baraka books I reread, the amount of things I looked at, the darker side of Thomas Edison I researched. Oh, yeah. And I had this great conversation with my brother who said, you can't do a piece about the politics and the riots. He's like, you will not get the commission. And that kind of stumped me, I have to say. I was like, oh, I can't, there's another way. So I thought there was something about the engagement, the deep engagement with the location, the history, the personal, the narratives, and my spending time there led me to realize, let me just focus on what we share. And what we share is, what do we share as modern day travelers? We share the magic and the awe that I still think flying holds. I still don't, yes, I know there's physics, but I still don't understand how it happens. I was thinking about what do we share in terms of the annoyances now of modern day travel, that they're not lovely like it was when I was a child traveling. But I was thinking, like, what can I do that kind of captures different sensations? So I was thinking about the ascent and descent. I was thinking, if I capture photographs, I can capture, it could be a range. It could be a range of the beautiful landscape that I didn't even know how much beauty actually exists in Newark and the surroundings. I could focus on the inventions and the industry. Say the chemical coast, as ugly as it is, it allows us to kind of exist in the world in a certain way. I spent a lot of time in neighborhoods, and I thought, okay, maybe I could just capture some sort of images that could be both maybe familiar for people who fly out that terminal every time they travel. So I thought, what could I do? Like having these images that people recognize, but then for people who don't know the place, I could have images that could be familiar or kind of known, but also these kind of hidden gems as well. I'm supposed to do this thing. So one thing I decided on the images, but then I thought, let me focus on the descent and ascent. So I knew one side would have images of like a bird's eye view and another of looking up. And then it occurred to me, there's so much about travel that's embedded in this disorientation, even if it's temporary, of being like, wait, I flew 5 hours and now it's nighttime somewhere, or it's like daytime, it's morning. So I was thinking about that temporary disorientation that we all feel, that I was thinking about the excitement of travel, but also maybe the nervousness that's tied to it too. But I thought if I have the images when you arrive on the arrivals level, so that's the first floor when you're arriving to the baggage claim, I thought, wouldn't it be interesting if maybe those images that you first see when you look up are actually bird's eye view? Thinking that some people would have seen that view as they land. So what does it mean to kind of seeing a perspective that you wouldn't normally see from that position, from down below? And then the idea of when you're looking down into the work, oh, I have to do this. When you look down into the work, you're seeing images of the sky. So this is actually a view from one of the sculptures that focuses on sunrise to daylight. So if you stand literally right underneath the sculpture, this interesting conflation happens. And I was interested in, I hope you guys can fly out of this airport, because interesting things happen. I love that. I was thinking, how could I make a work that could be spectacle, but also not so spectacle that you feel as though you can consume it all in one? So at each of the 3 levels, the experience is very different. So this is the arrivals, and you're looking up and seeing this strange conflation of the images. But then if you're on the concourse level, this great thing happens. I'm going to go back to this level. Concourse level is an in-between level. It's a great thing where all of a sudden you can look down and see the images of the sky, but looking up at the same time. And then another strange thing that happens, I was thinking, I knew I needed the space, but I also didn't want the piece to take up space. So it's a funny thing at certain places where you stand, it does that thing where it almost disappears. It becomes almost like a line drawing, and it allows for Layqa's work to really, my piece to kind of fade away and for that work to kind of come through. And then it's funny, you can't see it here, but that ring, this ring actually, there's actually a mural. You can see one of your murals in it. So if you're there, it's like, oh, that's his work. I love that. Okay, let me go back. So I could talk, I don't know if you guys want to hear about how I thought about, I spent a lot of time thinking what kind of images. Oh, why is this moving? I'm going to put it down. I kept thinking of the range of scales of images, the range of distances. I was thinking about where can I take these photographs. So I had the joy of having, some scary helicopter rides, like going around. It's like, no, I have to retake the city hall. I need one shot of city hall. I spent time in the control tower, taking images from up there. I was allowed access into the port to take images there, and it was hard because I started off with about 5,000 photographs, and I really had to narrow it down to literally 68. So I had to really think about what are the experiences do I want people to have. Yes, the familiars, some unknowns, but I was also thinking about I wanted images that felt cinematic, images that felt like sublime, images that felt graphic, images that were saturated. So I was really trying to want to have this mix of these textures. But another thing I was thinking about, I'm not from Newark, and I don't have that lived experience, but I thought, okay, if I have these photographs of the familiar or things that are known, what can I do to kind of not complete the picture? So the idea came to have these, say, familiar images, and you'll see images of the, say, New Jersey Turnpike. But if they're fragments and they're abstractions, it's this thing I kept thinking of as like a metaphor for humans. Like you don't get to, we unfold and we're known over time. It doesn't happen all at once. So even though you might recognize, oh, that's definitely the Jersey Shore, you may not know that what part of the Jersey Shore, while someone maybe who's local might. So I wanted this thing where it could be both novel and uncanny, but also this intimacy that could be known, but also allow for space of you don't get to have it all, and almost like leaving more for the imagination. Or I think about sometimes when you're arriving at a place, there's the anticipation. So there's something about the anticipation with this work too. I was also thinking, this will be the last thing I'll say, I'm going to move on. I was thinking about like how do I make a static inanimate object? But I really wanted to have that feeling of movement. You're in an airport and it's like this choreography between, the baggage carousels are going and people are waiting to catch their flight, other people are milling around because their flight's delayed. So you have this kind of, this choreography going on. So I wanted the sculpture, even though I was like, how am I going to do this with a static object? But then it does do a thing with the approach, where it does do this thing where you see it, equally distanced, 2 feet apart, each ring. And then all of a sudden you approach it and it starts to distort. Other times it contracts. It feels like it's compressing. Other times it feels like it's stretching out. So, and what I like about that is like there's so much that we can't control with flying, but somehow you have some sort of agency with the sculpture that you kind of control the way you experience and feel it. I think I should end there, because I could just go on and on. My family knows I can just, I'll end there. Oh, I don't know if I showed all the images. Okay. Oh, that's City Hall. Oh my God, so when I was working with this professional photographer, he kept taking photographs. I said, you have to remember, we had to put like a ring on his viewfinder, because I said, you can't center the thing. The center has to be at the edge, because that's the thing I want to capture. So we kept going around and around with the City Hall. I got a little queasy with that ride. And then we did this PBS documentary thing, and then I was like, no one's looking at my sculpture. Being the baby artist, like, no one's looking. And then I see this kid, like ran and took a picture of this kid, and the dad's like, come on, we have to go. I was like, no, look. So that was kind of the most recent photograph, is that one.
Hi. Aldi Tuta Mashikuna. Buenas noches, ¿cómo están? and hello, good evening. So yeah, my name is Layqa, and I'm an artist. I'm an immigrant. I'm from New Jersey. I'm from the Americas, and I make murals like this one, and this one, and now this one. So when it comes to, whoa, this just keeps going. Pause. Okay, so when it came to this project, I think, like most projects, I was just trying to find a narrative. And for me, that takes a long time. So like in a lot of applications, I just lied. You know, I just had a concept and I didn't have like the actual reality of the mural, because that comes from a process of investigation and talking to people and finding out what the mural is about. So I titled this piece, Between the Future Past, based on a Bomba Stereo song from a Colombian band. And then from there, it just kept sort of like feeding me and looping me around this idea of layer concepts and finding out different histories of New Jersey, not like the classic story of New Jersey. Like, you know, what do you think about when you think of New Jersey? Is it the turnpikes? Is it the Sopranos? Like, what is that? What are these? And then I worked through it. And so then that led to the creation of this piece, this sort of design. I had a wonderful team of lighting specialists, historians, architects who helped me out. You know, we would come up with ideas on how to solve issues, and then those would become actually part of the design itself. The most New Jersey gaudy thing that I did was add a gold trim around it. That's very NJ State. Josh knows it. He helped me design this whole thing. But yeah, it's those tiny little things that sort of like speak to also, yeah, like my cross-cultural identity as a person from New Jersey who's also an immigrant who, like, you know, I didn't know English when I came to this country. So that was another fact of the project that was interesting for me. I remember landing at JFK. I remember seeing New York for the first time. So it was interesting to think about how will people engage with this piece when they arrive to this country, and what kind of a loaded question is that? I know it was very interesting to think about not even the responsibility, but just like the truth of that. Like, what kind of country are we in? Who gets to be celebrated here? Who gets to be put on the dollar bill? Who gets to be part of this narrative? And for me, it's everyday people, it's friends that I know, it's working with historians to find narratives that are not part of like the main story. It's working with mechanics, Port Authority, asking them what do they want to see in this mural, taking those ideas and turning them into the design itself. Working with, let's see what else we find here. Kimberly here, who works at FedEx, or Julia, who's a security guard from Peru, who, where's this keep going, who started just cleaning airplanes and then connecting her to the sort of like European migration with pictures of Ellis Island on the other end, and then a cathedral in Newark, a basilica that was built by immigrants. And it's just, all of these things just led me to imagine the sort of very complex narratives that we all inhabit. And you might not see it there, but my aim is to put all of these little puzzle pieces there together for you to sort of reflect on. There's certain things, for example, that is squash, and it's part of the Three Sisters, like this very ancient indigenous knowledge of how to grow crops that you can find. Like, I first found out about it when I was in Canada, and it's something that indigenous people have been doing in like South or Central America. And so those are the sort of symbols that I think unite us, right? But they're not in your dollar bill, maybe? Well, anyway, so that's where I was getting at, and that's how I was constructing this piece. Yeah, so lots of collaboration, working with photographers, working with models. One of the suggestions from one of the models seen dancing here was to write in the Lenni Lenape language, welcome to Lenape Hoking, welcome to the Lenni Lenape land. And I actually didn't really check in with anyone to add that, and it's there. I don't know. I wonder if that would have passed, you know, like the scrutiny of Port Authority, but there it is. There are other secret messages in there that I won't tell you about, but they're there. And I think that's also part of what makes public art powerful. You know, it's this wonderful mirror for you to fill in with meaning. You can see this and you can hate it, you can see this and it can make your day better. But I only have this tiny bit of agency when it comes to that. The mural is not finished until somebody looks at it. And I'm so happy that now it's open because I felt like you, that it wasn't finished until you had someone come around and look at it and make meaning out of it. So yeah, that's between the future and past. I think I'm also gonna stop there and we can have a chat.
Well, I could listen to both of you talk about these works and your works in general, which are so fascinating. It's interesting that you each developed these works independently, but they do actually work so beautifully together. And you obviously have developed, you know, a real mutual affection and admiration for each other's work. And that's been a great pleasure, and I think it's one of the pleasures of visiting the terminal and seeing the work, how they do tell such a unique story and evoke the spirit of this place so beautifully. I wonder if maybe we could talk a little bit more about the process. So, because each of you have a well-established practice, and yet at the same time, this is quite different from anything that either of you have been invited to do or had the opportunity to do. Or even the impulse to do. I don't know if either of you could have ever imagined that your most ambitious major public work would be created for Newark Airport. But here we are. So I'm curious how your regular practice, your regular studio practice, your regular exhibition making, or, you know, like in your case, a very well-established mural practice, but mostly outdoor spaces, very, you know, a kind of much more grassroots engagement in a sense. You know, how you both had to think differently about your work to create these pieces.
I have to say I was quite intimidated to take this on, I think for several reasons. I think I've done quite a bit of public art work and memorial projects, and I think I've done them in places where there were always repeat viewings. So there was a thing of where the work didn't have to, I didn't have to worry that in one go someone was going to have to kind of get it. I trusted that. I actually made the work thinking that how will the work shift over time, it being a temporal, experiential quality is highlighted. So I was worried, like, oh no, someone might only see this once. So what do I do to make sure that it doesn't become easy, doesn't become decoration, just doesn't become beauty? And I think the charge to make it 3 stories quickly made me realize it could still have the lineage that I've had in the past of the work. But I think also with artwork, I think at a certain point you decide that there are always different publics for your work. You know, so in a gallery, it's a public. You know, and I do work, if you do work in a neighborhood in Kensington and Philadelphia, it's a public. So it's okay for you to think about this is just another public for the work. And for me, I think that allowed me to kind of let go and trust that I can't deny myself in the work, so the work is going to be layered, and you're not going to get it all in one go, and just be okay with that, and that's actually part of the joy. is that we don't ever get to have it all, but there's something beautiful about the potential in the future.
Sure. So as far as that question goes, it's interesting because sometimes when I make work, it can be destroyed in a day or a month. There's some murals that I should turn to NFTs because they no longer exist. So thinking about this project, it was sort of interesting to think of the context or how it's being placed in this sort of public transit space, right? And all of this backing. It definitely changed my ideas around it. I started to think about, legacies and like that weird word and concept. So the approach was a little bit different, and then the process was a lot different for me because like I said, sometimes I work through the night and finish a mural, or it might take me a week. This time it took me months and months, and some of that was just a lot of planning. It was something different than what I've done before. But I agree with that idea of sort of different publics as well, because that was another issue. Not an issue, but something else I was thinking about. Somebody will see this just as they're coming in and driving out. And it's like an immediacy that you have to get at. And sometimes I'm very aware of that when I make a mural. So that's why I think of it sort of macro as this first reading, and then the narratives that you can hide between that. It's definitely different.
So actually tell us more, Layqa, about your process. How did you actually do this?
Little by little. First.
How'd you choose who?
That's a very interesting question. Sometimes I start with the familiar, with friends that I know. This is Jamie Gamis. She's a local artist activist. That's Sarah Vaughan, local Newark jazz star. Pictures that I found, people that I met, the relationships that were created. It's also like a lot about a conversation of consent. Would you like to be part of this mural? And what does that mean? What does that mean for this person to not be this sort of like very public-facing figure? So I had to explain the whole process, and I talked to about probably 25 people at the airport, and at the end of the day, I ended up using 4. So it was a process. All of that took time. And then that's where I get to be, like where I take all my agency and I'm like, I want to tell this story, and I want to highlight this person. So at the end of the day, I guess it was just me trying to find what fits best for that. But long story short, this is aluminum, an aluminum backing with a mural that's painted on a polyester fabric. I designed it, it gets printed. Part of it, for example, the purple parts are high resolution printing, everything else is hand painted. So a ghost image of the design comes out, and then I worked in the studio with a wonderful team for a couple of months, just hand painting the rest of this. And then again, like my petty Virgo self will save all the beautiful portraits so I could paint them on a weekend, just like do them all like that. And then, assistants would do other things. But yeah, it was like a little bit of that. So I always find an in-between, like, because at the end of the day, also like, this is the art that makes me happy, and I want to be able to make something that shows the care and the love that I bring to it. Not that I didn't care about the rest. It was all wonderfully made.
And had you done a process like that before, or did you have to kind of come up with how to do this?
The actual process of the printing, all of that, that's from Philadelphia Mural Arts. So a lot of this, amazing. A lot of this is, I think my whole education has been learning all these ways of making murals and then finding out what the site requires. Sometimes it might be spray paint, sometimes it's aluminum backing. And that just comes from trying different things out. This I've done before, not to this scale, and not in this process. Like, I've never tried the printing and the painting. But lots of experimentation.
Yeah. well, the result is fantastic.
Thank you.
And Karyn, similar sort of question. I'm curious about the process to actually make the work. Let's jump back.
It's always funny. I tell my students I have maybe 15 minutes a year of joy or butterflies, and the rest is like, how the hell do I make this thing? So I mean, I take photographs, but I knew that the scale of this, the size of the photographs had to be. I mean, each ring is the largest is 19 feet, so these had to be high resolution. So I had to, I had to call on 2 professional photographers to help me do this project, which is always hard when you automatically, like, you have to give up your agency to make the work happen. But you realize that you're the director. You have to make. So working with someone who does, aerial photography, it was exciting to have someone who does that for a living. But for me, I still felt as though I spent a lot of time like on Google Maps and doing searches to find the views. I had to spend a lot of time. I mean, I always do a lot of research, but I think I do that research, but then I have to do the next level of research, and I have to talk to people, because I wanted to make sure that I didn't just stay at the surface. Like, I knew there were sites I wanted to include, but I knew I wanted it to be things that you would be excited about. So there was a level of where I had to just keep digging and digging, finding sites, but then also spending almost like doing things where I was like almost overnight walking the streets of Newark, taking photographs and looking for. So there was a bit more of, I would say, maybe, I think because it was at once hyper specific, but within that hyper specificity, the depths and the breadth were so grand that it was hard to wrangle. So the fact that I started off with 5,000 photographs, it was exciting. But then at a certain point, I got down to 300 photographs. I was like, but I want all of them. So it was really hard. So it got to a certain point where there's some photographs that, there was a point when I was calling myself the ring lady. The 300 photographs I chose that were contenders were then each printed in a circle of one of the 5 sizes. So literally, I had tables with 5 times 300, and then I'm putting them together all hours. And there was this thing where there were certain photographs I said, will definitely be in. And in the end, it's like tears. I'm like, you can't be in this because it was tears. You don't understand. My wife was like, Karyn, just make the decision. Enough already.
That happens so much, right?
It was a thing where, when I said earlier, like, I wanted that range. I wanted it to be like, oh, I see that, like, oh, what is that? I wanted that strange thing of the familiar. I wanted that strange thing of recognition, or then this thing where it's almost, you get closer, and like, you see this thing, you assume it's something, and you get closer, you realize, oh, that's a shipping container. Or there's something that Sam was obsessed about. There's a shipping container that had these dots on it, and he's like, it looks like googly eyes. So I kept thinking, like, how do I do it? I wanted it to be enough where it would keep on revealing, and I think it was really hard because I had, a list of, say, categories, transportation. So that's bridges, turnpike, planes. I mean, and I couldn't have everything represented, but I had this list of, like, I knew I wanted to have the cathedral because that's such an iconic. So I knew I wanted something from Ironbound because I had one of my best, Mexican meals there. So some of it was personal too, but it was. I would say it was really hard because, at once I wanted it to. I think it's also my not being from Newark. I felt more responsibility to not mess up, but also, or to give you something that would be different than what a one-time person will see. But at the same time, having to let go and say, Karyn, but this is your subjectivity matters, and your interests and your tastes and your. So at a certain point, I had to kind of just say, you're making this composition, and it's from your. It's at the end of the day, this piece is a record of a moment. It's an archive. It's a moment in time. Like, there's an image of the terminal that's being, one of the terminals that's being torn down. Yeah. So it's okay for it to be this record, and let it exist in that way.
Maybe actually, I want to find out more about, like, how you became a ring lady, but it might be helpful for the audience as well, just to locate the architecture in this image, for example. That
I didn't tell you the
on
mirror. Oh my God, the mirror.
Well, there's the mirror, but there's the elevator. What you're looking at here is this sort of atrium space looking up towards the skylit ceiling. You can see actually the natural light, comes through with those sort of the vented ceiling. You see a kind of glass enclosed elevator bank that carries people up and down. There are staircases sort of behind that run alongside. And this whole space is mirrored on sort of the other side of this core circulation area. But the two sides are not the same in terms of like the composition of your work, the rings. So you've talked a lot about the photographs and that process.
Yeah.
How did you become the ring lady? Like what?
Well, the shape, I knew the shape seemed to make sense. I wanted this thing that kind of is almost like you could think about an orb-like shape. I'm thinking like the universality of like a circle, but I didn't want them to be the same. I kept thinking a daytime, when you arrive in the daytime is very different than Ryan. The other week I arrived back from Portland at midnight, and airports feel so different. So it made sense to have these two, kind of situate them, one being sunrise to daytime and the other one sunset to nighttime, because they would reveal something different. I mean, seeing the spectacle of those lights of like the runway, but also there's a loneliness or like an eeriness. So I kind of liked that they each had a different feeling to them, and that was important. But I was also very much aware, like we had renderings of what the architecture would look like, and I was also aware of this thing is going to be massive, but I also wanted to not be there. I don't know how to explain. Like I wanted to not be like, there's the work of art. How could it be a thing that you see, then you also, it kind of just fades the way other things do. So I was aware of, I knew there'd be those slats in the ceiling, so I was interested in that. And these slices, I kept thinking about these as being slices, or like a slice of a life, slice of a time, slice of a location. One thing we couldn't afford to do is that the edge is about this thick. I wanted it to be like mirror polished so you could see yourself, but would have been too expensive. It couldn't happen. But it's okay because it still reflects, it's a blurry reflection. And then I kept thinking, okay, so when you're looking down, you're seeing the sky. But then all of a sudden I thought, why don't I have a mirror at the top that kind of completes it? And all of a sudden we return the sky to the sky. So all of a sudden it's put back, and then we had to figure out a way to, I mean, there was an amazing team at UAP who helped figure this all out with these cables.
I was going to say, you didn't do this at Kinko's, right?
No, exactly. Like in my little studio in G-Town. And the cables holding it together, I like that they were doing this thing where it's almost like a puppet, but also you're thinking about the tension, or you could think about it doing this undulation thing happening. But the returning the sky to the sky felt like a kind of a beautiful moment, because then you're looking up and you're seeing the sky, and because it's a very open ceiling, the sky, my representation of sky is next to the sky that's actually the little sky, but you could be looking at the sky that's day, and it could be day or it could be night. So I kind of like that playing around. I'm very much aware of your presentness and and time. Yeah.
Layqa, I want to, and we'll open up to audience questions in a moment, but maybe just before we do that, I'm curious to know if you could talk a little bit more, say, about your own Kichwa heritage and how that has influenced, or if there are elements of that woven into your conception of the work.
Yeah, that's interesting because, like Karyn, I don't know, like when art stops being about myself, even if it's for the public. I think it's hard for me to find those delineations, so I don't. So a lot of the work that I'm making it because I want to see it, and that comes from the things that interest me, the things that are important to me. So I come from the Cañaris of Ecuador, and I'm sort of reclaiming that history by learning the language, by just living and creating the things that I want to see. And a lot of that just seeps into the work. There's like this idea of language being cyclical that I was very interested in, and I brought to this piece. There's also some work from a designer that created a font based on ancient sculptures and iconography from the Andes. And so that font is spelling out New York and New Jersey in the background. It's all the design that you see there. But that's not something that I tell everyone, and now I'm telling everybody. But it was like sort of the underlying truth where I build upon. And then on top of that, you have this layer of it's New Jersey or it's New York, or there are all these other conversations. So yeah, it's there, and it's just like I'm happy that I don't need to choose. I can just be my full self whenever I'm making work. And I think it's taking a long time for me to get to that point as a public artist, because maybe as a younger artist, I did think like, who is the public and does this have to fit within their parameters? But no, not anymore. I think we talked a little bit about that in the back. The older we get, the more badasses we become.
Well, these are badass works, for sure. Love to know if anyone in the audience would like to ask a question. I see yeah, there's a question right here. We have a microphone, so please use that.
Hi. I'm from Staten Island, so I use that airport. I haven't been there yet. But I'm wondering, how did you even find out about this? Was there an ad on the internet and then a committee selected you? And then are they up for good? Are they changing every year? Like, how does that work? And then for Karyn, I know you went through agony and ecstasy together to create what you did. Now, the young man over there, how do you pronounce your name? Okay. You were able to do yours in the studio because it was panels. But how did you do that? Because it's giant rings made out of what, metal? I mean, and did you actually...
I wish we could show some process on Instagram, some process shots.
And did you hand paint it, or was it photo-real? No, yours.
Oh, like photos.
Was it...
Photos, baby.
So...
Photos, baby.
Well, that's several questions, so let's give them a chance to.
Wait, what was it?
I think the first one was for you.
Yeah.
Oh, you want me? Come on. No. Well, these are both. I mean, these are both permanent commissions. There is also a temporary program that the airport has created. I think there's something like 27 other art installations sort of throughout the terminal that are featuring sort of New Jersey and Newark artists and that are rotating, at least some of them, maybe annually. I'm not sure the details. We weren't involved in those. We were really exclusively involved in these sort of major permanent commissions. And the process there was that Public Art Fund developed a kind of a short list of artists together with the advice of the committee that I mentioned at the beginning of arts professionals in New Jersey, wonderful partners like folks at the Newark Art Museum and Rutgers University and the New Jersey State Arts Council. And, so we had a fantastic team of people, of course, with the Port Authority leadership, Huntley Lawrence and his team. So, it was a very robust process. It was a very fast track because there wasn't a lot of time to get all of this done. But so you...
9 months? But I'm curious with that question in terms of, I just feel as though our works complement each other so well. They both are imbued with narratives, but they are narratives where there's space for the visitor, the incidental art viewer to kind of insert themselves in. My images, there is not a single image of a person, but beings and people are implied in it, while yours have the representation of those bodies that could be in those. So there's something, the curating, however you guys, I don't know who chose, the relationship between the two works seems to be a perfect way for the audience, but also in terms of what we're each offering in our works, in terms of representation or abstraction or partial narratives. I think in a way it forms a story together, which I love about, I love that this happened.
Uh,
James
I
in the
did-
house. Oh, sorry.
do you
Can I
want to
ask
just
you a question?
clarify to what the work is made of?
Oh. It's sublimated photographs into aluminum, two aluminum pieces, and in between that is this Sam, help me out. What's it called? I'm losing my words. The webbing, like a honeycomb core inside. It sounds like yummy. And there's this whole thing where we worried about the weight, like they actually had to add more, like they're good thing that they hadn't built it yet, because we're like, it needs to be stronger to hold the weight of this. But we had to do things to kind of lighten it, because it still a lot of weight, even if it's aluminum.
Any other questions? There's one right
And
there.
I think you're talking about the infrastructure itself. I remember, trying to tweak you about this. But to what level did you have a hand in creating the infrastructure? What was your input to get it?
No.
And that's for the both
I
of you.
said I wanted to look like this, and then the engineers would be like, "Oh, we can't have it be that thick. So, what are you okay with?" So there was a design. The complete design was mine, but I'm not an engineer, So there were decisions that we had to make, that they had to make, and then they'd say, "Oh, Karyn, we have to make this adjustment." Like, say the number of cables. There's a certain point I'm like, we can't have so many cables. It's going to look like a bad marionette. Like what, you know what I mean? So like there were things where decisions had to be made in terms of engineering and just to make the sculpture work. But with those decisions, I kind of had to have a role in saying, because I knew it could shift how the work would look aesthetically, which then affects what it is conceptually. So yeah, but yeah, I don't have those skills.
Yeah, I think we arrived at the end of the process, so we just worked with what was there. I think that's maybe also what you're asking about. I was reacting to the space that was already there, and because construction was still happening, some edits had to happen, just with maybe like the sizing a little bit. But other than that, yeah, just had like a canvas or an area to work with.
And then we have a question.
Hi, good evening. I think I have two questions. I'll separate them out. One, more visually, I think you spoke a little bit to the curating this kind of the spiral, all of this kind of symbology in the vibration of the space, of the vibration of not just of the city, of the movement, of being very much at the heart of this globalization within an airport, but I also see it in the painting with the abstract kind of nebulous background and line and glow. And wanted to get a little bit of insight at your own conversations around the meaning and symbolism on that. And the second question is, I think, more directed towards Layqa, your collaborative process. Can you speak a little bit more on the protocols? And you dove a little bit into it in terms of consent with the portraiture, but that kind of collaborative nature, what were some other points that really maybe cemented themselves in this process?
Yeah, definitely. I'm always taking advantage of projects because I can learn from them. I went to painting school. They didn't teach you how to make any of this stuff. So, I try to learn about active listening, about what it means to sit down with a model, come up with ideas for the modeling, and along with a photographer, come up with more ideas, and spend hours photographing. And at the end of it, having like close to 1,000 pictures, out of which I get to use 4. Kind of like the same process. There's a book in here somewhere, right? I always think about that when I'm making murals. Like there's so much that goes into it that you will never see. But it comes down to that, and I think that comes from a practice of engaging with the public and sort of, yes, having authorship of the mural, but also stepping out of the way so that narratives can be amplified. And then I just become the sort of medium for that. And that makes me very happy. It's also how I get to make my best work, I think. not to say, again, that I'm pulling myself completely out of it, because that's impossible, but it becomes shared authorship. And I think that's, to me, the most important part of it. There was one day when Julia was able to come in and see her piece while we were installing, and I was actually on this bridge, and she's all the way on the left, and she's a security guard, so she came in, saw it, everybody was like clapping, and all her coworkers were happy. And I was able to watch that from far away, which is usually what happens. Like, I leave the mural, it stays, these things are happening. They're not captured, but they are powerful and they're beautiful. And there's, if I can capture like 2% of that, and you as a viewer can see it, and I can maybe connect to that narrative, or maybe read the legend and find out about this, then it becomes, I don't know, something else. So that's what I'm thinking about with the process of engagement, and I just hope I can like keep pushing that idea a little bit more. And I think as far as the first question, sort of thinking about the energy and the process of creating imagery, it comes from that same sort of back and forth conversation. I would ask people that I interviewed what they wanted to see. A lot of them said the sky or the sunset or the sunrise. And so that gives me ideas of palettes, ideas of colors, of shapes. And I try to like bring it back into the design. And there's this sort of unseen back and forth and layering again that ends up with whatever the hell I made. Yes, thank you.
I know we have another call. Do you want to say? Yeah. Okay, so let's go. Yes.
I already have the microphone. Thank you for your generosity in sharing both the public and the secret parts of your work. We will be lucky to see them. We're flying out of Newark in April. I actually want to build on your question that you had and around this notion of permanence. I think the past 3 years has taught us that we're living in a time of impermanence and fluctuation. And I think I'd like to split this question into like practical and poetic for all three of you, whoever wants to take it. Like on the practical side, are you using materials that are going to last 1,000 years, 100 years? Are you building a maintenance and care plan and restoration, preservation of these works? How does that work? How far in advance do you plan for an airport? And I think, of course, poetically, like, how far in the future are you looking? Like, what actually is a permanent piece of public art?
It's between the future past.
I mean, I make work that's permanent, but I have issues with that. I mean, I would love for this piece to be around 10 years from now, but I'd be shocked if it was around 50 years from now. I just don't know. I don't know how we'd be flying. I don't know what our bodies will, I just don't know if this would make sense. And not saying art's supposed to make sense, but I don't know if it will be relevant. So when I talk about, I mean, once you finish making a work of art, it's already history. But at the same time, it's contemporary. Because if you're looking at the present moment, it's you see a Mona Lisa, it's historical, but it's contemporary. So I land more in the presentness is what matters, because it's both the past and the future in that moment, But I don't think it will be around in 50 years. I don't. Maybe, but I almost hope not.
Or the work might be and we might not.
Well,
who knows?
Probably not.
I mean.
But I don't know. Or more so, maybe I'm more interested. Like, I like the idea if there is something that's seemingly permanent. Like, I'm working on a public art project now that like it has to last for 100 years. But if that's happening alongside is something that could be a gesture that happens for a moment that's indelibly imprinted in terms of experience for me, that's just as important as this other thing. So I think it's the range and the mix of that is what matters for me.
I agree. I think we think about it by not worrying about it a little bit. To be in the moment is what makes it powerful. And yeah, like we're using aluminum. That's going to be around. But for me personally, I was also thinking about what does that mean? Like, yeah, what is legacy? What does a public piece of work that's supposed to be like this monument to something mean? when I'm like putting narratives that are not even like complete. I mean, they're very private moments, but yeah, that is what is important. Maybe you don't need to get the whole picture. So not to say that that's a radical thing to say, but it's just something that I wanted to look at, not at the monument, at the forever, but at the now.
Yeah, with that, I think about, you think about the archive as such a thing we talk about now. It's what's about evidence, and it's a recognition of the evidence at this moment, which is history, but that's the evidence of that for its ramifications or its implications for the future. So, yeah, evidence.
Yeah, I think maybe it's also not our responsibility, although we do have like a maintenance plan, but it's...
There is. It's like 50 pages or something. It's really long.
But then it falls onto you, like as the public, how are you gonna take care of this work? Like we made it, so how are we gonna take care of it?
I think we have time for one last question. Oh, maybe you get, there's one right up the back.
My brother-in-law. When did you get here? I can hear you.
So, Karyn, we haven't discussed this, but I was wondering, like, because most people are going to be at the airport and we're busy and we're not intending to encounter art, did either of you sort of think about, I need a wow factor. I need to make you stop. I need to make you think. I need a speed bump. I need something there because, we just can't be subtle. And I was just wondering, like, how much thought went into that piece? Like, I got to stop you and make you, you might you're not going to miss your flight, but I want to know, like, what did you do or did you think about that? Because we're busy. We're on our way to the airport.
I called up Mary. I was like, no one's looking at my piece. She's like, but you sent me a picture of some kids looking at it. And then you just told me you saw this black guy, this brother who stopped, and he was like walking around with his suitcase in circles. And I realized that you're right. I was thinking, I actually said, I wish this piece was in the gates area because when you're milling around and your flight's 3 hours late, you're going to be all up in my sculpture. But when you enter on departures, the taxi dropped you off, you look straight ahead, and those are the automated ticketing things. You have to kind of want to look around because you could miss it. Or literally downstairs with arrivals, your back is you're looking at your baggage. Behind the baggage is my piece. So it has to be, but I think that's okay that not everyone will pay attention because that's part of the world we're in right now where we are. So the fact that if you do decide to take a moment to just look to the left or look behind you, there's no doubt you're going to then want to pay attention. But there are so many people who just literally came down the stairs and went straight to the baggage claim, so didn't even bother to look. They have myopic, they have the blinders on. But if you just are deciding to be in the world for half a second and you notice it, I know that it's I have to say it's kind of spectacular. Kind of is. I don't always say that about my work, but this is like, damn, with a U-M, damn.
Like you really have to see it. It's like levels. Wow factor for me is the invitation. It's the part of the mural that asks you to get closer. I think that comes from being a public artist, making murals, knowing that sometimes you're driving and you have 2 seconds to look at something and understand it. So that's, again, the first reading of this. And then after that, the payoff is you spending time with the piece. Maybe do take in those few seconds before picking up this pieces at arrivals. And then just wondering. And then if you ask a question, then I have succeeded as an artist just because you took some time and looked at something and got a reaction from it. But yeah, I'm always thinking about the first reading and then the second one, the third. And then for this, maybe some of that is the color. I was really obsessed with purple when I was doing this piece, so you can tell.
Well, let me just, on behalf of everybody, thank the two of you for these incredible works. We'll all be rushing to Newark Terminal A to, hop on the next flight, or just hang out because you don't have to go through security to see these works. But thank you for sharing tonight so many insights. It's been really wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.